Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Hosting Simplified series. I'm Goreti Golden, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to deploy a simple Flask Backend API for products on a shared hosting server using a subdomain. And I'm going to ensure that I make it super easy and practical for better understanding. So I hope you stick around and let's dive right in. So before we access the cPanel, you first of all have to ensure that you prepare your backend project. So apparently I do have a simple Flask API, and it really has simple endpoints. And one of my main endpoints is the one that returns or fetches all the products. And maybe a quick one, when you look into my source code, you see that I'm working with an application factory function, and I'm also ensuring that I do register all my database instances here, and I've also worked with Flask migration in terms of migrating the tables, and also the fact that I'm going to be working with a front-end project in React in the upcoming series. I ensured that I registered the cross-origin resource sharing package within my backend, and also ensuring that apparently I'm actually allowing the origin of the local server for React, but when I do deploy, I will ensure that this is updated to the domain for the front-end project. And I'm also working with blueprints in terms of registering the endpoints for the products, and just one other index route just to ensure that the backend is really running as expected. So when you look into my project structure, you see that I do have the virtual environment, and this is in terms of the Windows operating system. And then within the project folder, I also have the migrations file. And the main purpose of this was to ensure that I have the ability of working with an object relational mapper, in that I do not directly work with the database to create the tables via SQL directly, but I do have an object relational mapper, and that is Flask SQL Alchemy. And this is my current product model. So with the product model, I do have simple attributes on this entity. I do have the ID as a primary key, then the name of the product, and then the price, then also the image URL and a description. So I already migrated this to the database, and my local database is hosting DemoDB. And then you see that I'm working with Alembic because of the fact that I have been working with Flask SQL Alchemy, and the products table is in this format. And these are some of the products that I do have in the database. But the fact that I'm already working with the API, I do have a controller that handles all the product creation process and also the process of fetching products from the database. So this is my code snippet, and the first function, list all products, is used to list or to return or to retrieve all the products from the database. Then I also have a function that creates the products with the attributes that I defined on the product model. And before you think about deploying your project, it is very key that you also go ahead and ensure that, for example, if it is the API, you ensure that your endpoints are working as expected. So apparently I do have Postman as an extension installed within Visual Studio Code. So when I try to access my hosting demo collection, and then mainly for example, the get products request, at this point of time, I'm going to reaccess the endpoint and then make a request. So you see that our response is returned, and let me try to zoom out. This is how the response is structured. I return the ID, the product image, the product name, the price, and this is precise for now. So in addition to that, I also have the endpoint that creates the product. So when I do access the create products endpoint, this is the endpoint that creates the product, and in terms of creating, this is always a post. So I ensured that I am working with a JSON format, and this is some of the data that I was trying to pass in. So at this point of time, most of my endpoints are working. So if we are looking at deploying the project to a server, so having ensured that your API is working as expected, the next step is for you to have a requirements.txt file. And with the requirements.txt file, this is always a file that is keeping track of all the packages and libraries that your project is using. And at this point of time, you can see that these are some of the libraries I have been working with. And whenever you really want to create one, all you have to do is, for example, if I go ahead and access my terminal, you always have the ability of typing pip freeze, then we append the requirements.txt file. Oh, my bad, this has to be a txt file. So I'll go ahead and clear this up and add a T, then press enter. Now at this point of time, you might not see any change because I already did have the requirements.txt file, and you see that the first one that I accidentally created was created, so I'll go ahead and delete it. But most of the times, if it does not exist, you go ahead and create it. And if it really existed and you maybe initially had some other libraries that you had installed, whenever you run the requirements.txt file, it goes ahead and re-updates this file with the new libraries that you're working with. So having cross-checked all that, the next step is for you to ensure that you do have the web server gateway interface.python file. Now at this point of time, I am having my bad, it is always supposed to be a requirements.txt. so this requires the s. So this is what I expected. So it's supposed to have an s in terms of the file name, and for this other one that I accidentally created, I'll go ahead and delete it as well. So once this is re-updated, it must really highlight the libraries in green, because I noticed that the libraries were just in white and that wasn't what I really wanted. So having updated that, you always have to ensure that you do have the web server gateway interface file. And at this point of time, I'm having this file named as the passenger web server gateway interface file, but I think the name doesn't really matter, but as long as it is a web server gateway interface file. So the purpose of this file is, one, first of all, this file is always going to act as your entry point for the web app, for the web application. So whenever we do host, for example, this API, this file is always going to inform the server on how to start up your web application. And of course, always informing it on how to handle your web requests. And of course, always informing it on how to handle your web application's web request. So whenever you do not have this kind of file, your application cannot communicate with the web server. So most of the times on shared hosting, the server always looks for this web server gateway interface file in order for it to start your application. And here, the application variable is always what the server works with as a callable variable. So whenever we have this file, the server goes ahead and looks up for a variable that it's going to work with, in that it has the ability of locating your application. So at this point of time, since I'm working with an application factory function, this is how I set up the path of my project, and also ensuring that I created the application variable that will be used by the web server gateway interface in order for the server to locate my API or web application. So having created all these two files, when I also look into my config.python file, you see that apparently the config file has a config class, and on this class I went ahead and I registered the SQL Alchemy database URL, or the connection string for the database, and apparently it points to the local database user and no password. And then since I actually changed my port is always set to 3307, but of course most of the times there are going to be cases whereby this is 3306. So for now I think this is okay. We shall update the connection string, having created the database on the server, and also maybe the password and the database user. Then there are going to be cases whereby maybe you do have an environment variable file, so you just always have to ensure that it is really set or ready for production. And for cases whereby we are going to switch to production, you can always go ahead and, for example, create a .env file in that you set the Flask environment to production. So for example, if I go ahead and update the config class, you see that I have updated the SQL Alchemy track modifications to false if we are switching to production. And also whenever you're going to work with maybe a secret key, you can always pass in your secret keys here, and also turning off the debug mode, and also updating the environment to production. Then there are cases whereby you're really going to work with a .env, so depending on your needs. So for now I'm going to keep it precise. We are now going to go ahead and create a zipped folder for our backend project. And whenever we are creating a zipped folder, we ensure that we do not include the virtual environment subfolder within our backend project folder. So all you have to do is to access your project files wherever they are being stored. So for my case, I'm working with the hosting demo folder. So I go ahead and open it up. And then within this folder, I do have the backend folder. So within the backend folder, you see that I do have a .git and then the .virtual environment folder. So I'm first of all going to do a Ctrl+A, then unselect the .env subfolder. At this point of time, I feel like I can keep the .git folder because it can be helpful in terms of continuous integration and continuous deployment moving forward. So having done that, I'll go ahead and add these to an archive, and the format is going to be a zipped format. Then I'll go ahead and click OK. So once this has been done, you see that I do have a copy of a zipped file for my backend. So once that is done, you go ahead and access your cPanel. So within the cPanel, the first thing that I am going to do is to ensure that I create a subdomain. So apparently there are already some other domains that do exist and also the subdomain. But for now, I can go ahead and create a new subdomain to act as a demo for this guide. So the subdomain is going to be, for example, API. Then actually it can be API demo. Then of course you go ahead and access your primary domain. So once this is done, this will be the document root for this subdomain. Then I go ahead and click on submit. So having updated that, when I go back to the cPanel and access the file manager by trying to refresh here, you see that we do have a newly created folder which is API demo.this domain. So if I go ahead and open it up, you see that this is all we have at this point of time. So having completed this creation of a subdomain, we can now go ahead and upload our zipped folder to the cPanel. So the first thing I am going to do, I'm going to ensure that I create a simple folder for our backend files before we upload them. So within the root folder of the cPanel here in the root directory. I'm going to go ahead and click folder. Then in here, this is going to be API demo backend. Then I think this is okay. We can just click on create. So having done that, you see that it went ahead and created this folder. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on it, then click on upload. So I'll go ahead and select the zipped file. So you always have to go ahead and select the zipped file, your zipped file for the backend project based on where exactly you stored that file. So for my case, it's within the projects and then hosting demo, then the backend, and then backend.zip. Then I go ahead and click on open. So having uploaded the zipped folder, we always have to go back into our main backend folder. And within this folder, you see that we do have the uploaded zipped file. And all you have to do is to go ahead and extract the files within this folder. So you always have the ability of selecting this and then right clicking. So when you do right click on this file, it gives you a number of options. So the exact option that you need is the one of extracting. So you click on extract, and the path to which we are going to be extracting is within the main backend folder. So you always have to do this based on the exact name that you assigned to your backend root folder. So for my case, I named it as API demo backend. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on extract files. So once that is done, you click on close, and you see that it automatically goes ahead and moves all the files and other folders that we did have in here. So I think I did not, I think I had the virtual environment folder included into the zipped file, but you must ensure that the virtual environment folder is not included within the zipped file. So for that case, I'm going to go ahead and delete this folder, and I will ensure that I'm permanently deleting it. Then I confirm. So once that is done, I notice that these other files and folders are okay. I do have the app folder, and this is keeping track of the controller, and I do have the product controller in here. Then when I navigate back, I do have the models folder, and this has the product file for the product model. Then in here, I do have the application factory function, and this is how it is structured. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. Then in addition to that, I also have the extensions.python file, and apparently I'm only working with the Flask SQL Alchemy extension and also the Flask migrate for migrating the tables, then the status codes. But for some of this, like the status codes, I haven't worked with it anyway. But you see that these are the right files that I really need, and most importantly, the configuration file, since we are going to use this to update the database URL. And in addition to that, at this point of time, you see that the passenger or the web server gateway interface file, when I try to edit it, for example, you see that it is still pointing to my currently defined structure, which is this, that fetches out the application factory instance that extracts out my root application and assigns it to the application variable, and this is okay. Then I did have a proc file, but for now we are not really going to work with this. Then most importantly, we also have the requirements.txt, and then I also had a run.python file. So having extracted the files, we are now going to move into creating a Python web application for this API project. So whenever I go back to the tools of the cPanel under the softwares, you're always going to see this setup Python app. So you go ahead and click on it. So this interface will always give you the ability of creating a Python web application. So apparently you see that this is one of the instances that I do have. But since I'm creating a demo, I'll go ahead and create a new application. So you click on that button. So this interface always has a form, and the first fields cater for the Python version. Now, whenever you are hosting, you have to ensure that the Python version on the server is very compatible with your project files. So for my case, if I really come back here and confirm with the Python version that I'm working with, so this is going to be Python, then -- version, because I'm working with the Windows operating system. So this is Python 3.1. So therefore, if I'm to create a new web application, the Python version is going to be in line with something like 3.1 to ensure that we do not get incompatibility issues. So you ensure that you update this according to the version that you have been working with locally. And then the next field is done for the application root, and it is a physical address to your application on a server that corresponds with its URL. So this is where we always upload the application files. So for my case, I had this created as API demo backend. So therefore this is going to have a value of API demo backend. And then the next field is done for the application URL, and it is an HTTP or HTTPS link to your application. So this most of the times is going to point to the domain or the subdomain that you're looking forward to working with. So for my case, I really want to have the backend deployed on this subdomain. So you go ahead and select based on the domain that you're going to work with. So this other side, I'm going to keep this null for now. And the next field is the one of the application startup file. So the value for the application startup file must always be the name of your web server gateway interface. So for my case, I'm working with the passenger web server gateway interface.python file, since it's the one that is keeping track of our root application folder that the server is going to use to locate our Flask application instance. So then the next field is the application entry point, and our callable is the application variable that I had locally defined within this file. So meaning that the callable can vary based on how you set it up locally. So having done that, all you have to do is to go ahead and click on the create button. And this is going to ensure that it goes ahead and creates a new web application for our API on this subdomain. So once this has been created successfully, you always receive this kind of notification. So I'll go ahead and close it up. But most importantly, whenever we do have a newly created web application on a particular domain, you're always going to see this created app. And why this is always created is that whenever we do have a new web application, locally, before we upload the files, we always have a virtual environment. But the virtual environment is always created in that it points to your local development. And whenever you're trying to switch into production, we ensure that we create a new virtual environment that is going to now point to the server and also pointing to your project files that are hosted locally. So this is a command that is always created for you automatically within the cPanel. So all you have to do is to just go ahead and copy this. So having copied it up, you always have to check out the terminal tool within the cPanel. And for those that are not yet conversant working with the cPanel, you can check out one of my other series on working with the terminal. So having accessed the terminal tool, this is always how it's going to look like. So the terminal tool always provides a command line interface while you are working with the server or the cPanel. So now all you have to do is to, first of all, when I type ls, this goes ahead and lists all the files and subfolders in this current working directory. And when I type a pwd, you see that this is the root path. So within the root path, I'm going to ensure that I navigate into the API demo backend folder. and then when I run the pwd, you see that I have navigated in here. Then I'm going to go ahead and clear this up. Then when I run an ls, I list all the files and directories in this path. Then at some point of time, maybe if you really want to see even the hidden ones, you pass on the -a option to ensure that you can also see hidden files. Like now, for example, you see that the .gitignore is also inclusive within this folder. So within this folder, all we are going to do is just go ahead and run the command that we copied from our newly created web application. So this command is going to go ahead and ensure that it activates the virtual environment, because initially when we create a new web application, you see that we always have a virtual environment that is automatically created for us, and all you have to do is to always ensure that you have a virtual environment activated. So if I really go ahead and open this up, you see that I do have a virtual environment for the subdomain of API demo backend, and then the other one here. So if I go ahead and open the other folder for the API demo, you see that this still points to our subdomain. So for us to be able to activate, all you have to do is to just go ahead and click on enter. So this command goes ahead and activates that virtual environment, and the ampersands here will ensure that having activated, we now navigate into the API demo backend folder. So once this has been created, actually activated successfully, this is how the terminal is now going to look like, meaning that you are working within the virtual environment path. So at this point of time, having activated the virtual environment, you will always have to go ahead and install the project dependencies or the project libraries. So since we do have a requirements.txt within our API demo backend folder, so we are going to go ahead and have this accessed by installing it. So you have to go ahead and run a pip install, then -r for the types, and this is going to be a requirements.txt file. So once this is typed, you go ahead and click on enter. So this command goes ahead and ensures that it installs all your project dependencies for the back end within the virtual environment of the server, which is live. So having this done successfully, all you have to do is to go back and of course try to refresh the applications that do exist, and most importantly, you will have to restart the web application for your backend project. So mine is API demo.this domain, and I'm just going to click here and say restart. So once that has been done, at this point of time, if we go ahead and access our domain, so when you click on the domains, you see that our subdomain is this one here, and the root document is within this. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and then open it in a new tab. So at this point of time, you see that we are having an internal server error. So most of the time, since we are working with the back end, it's not that easy for you to just tell that, okay, now according to this error, maybe there is something like this that is happening on the server, because frameworks like JavaScript for that work on the client side, you always have the ability of maybe inspecting for JavaScript, and maybe React you can always inspect. But for such frameworks, all you have to do is to always, maybe for example, work with the logs. So all you have to do is to always work with the logs. And in terms of Flask, all you have to do is to always access this .log file. So if, for example, I went ahead and clicked on view, there are going to be cases whereby maybe this log is really long and it might really take a lot of time. So most of the times you can just go ahead and download this file so that you look at the errors that would be returned or the exceptions in your project. So when you look at this log, it gives insights on the fact that the server is not locating our root application. So all you have to do is to go back into the file manager and access the web server gateway interface file that you're working with. And for my case, this is the passenger web server gateway interface.python file. So when I right click and then click on edit, you see that at this point of time, having created the new web application instance for our backend API project, this file was overwritten. So all you have to do is to ensure that, for example, you go ahead and re-update this file. So for my case, I'm going to go ahead and copy this and come back here and paste it within the web server gateway interface file. And this kind of structure is because of the fact that I am working with an application factory function. So this could really differ or depend based on how you have structured your project. So having done that, I'll go ahead and click on Save Changes. And once this is done, if again I try to reaccess the demo subdomain, you see that at this point of time, it is working as expected. It is really okay. But the fact that I'm really going to work with the database, I have to go ahead and also update my live-db. And of course, if I really go ahead and test this in a different account, you see that the response for the default route or the index route is returning an OK. And of course, the fact that I do have the endpoint for the products, if I went ahead and access this statically or actually explicitly within the URL path and pass in products. Okay, so when I try to access this endpoint, it is not returning what is right, because now this side I do not have a version prefix. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. When I update, you see that now this has actually returned an internal server error. So this means that our route really exists, but there is an internal server error. So this is because of the fact that I haven't updated the database connection string. So for my case, the fact that I'm working with a config file, all I have to do is to access the config.python file. Then I go ahead and edit it. So you see that within my configuration file, I do have a database connection string. So at this point of time, I have to go ahead and create a database and also update the database user and the password as required. So all you have to do is to access the Manage My Database tool. And within this interface, you have to go ahead and create a new database. So my database is going to be API demo DB. And having created that, I'll click on Create. Then I'll go back. So having created the database, you see that the name of the database is this one. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it up, then navigate back into the configuration file here, and then update the database name to this. Instead of hosting demo DB, this is going to be updated with this new name of the live database. So having updated that, the next step is to go ahead and create a database user. Now I'm also just going to ensure that the database user name is also in line with this. So API demo maybe user. And then in terms of the password, so if you really want to work with a password, you can always create your own password, or you can always work with a password generator. So I'll click on a password generator, then I can copy this password, then I say I have copied it, then we say generate password. Oh, my bad. So whenever you click on the generate password, it's going to go ahead and recreate for you a random password. So when you copy this password, that is, if this is the password you have chosen to work with, you click on I have copied this and you say use password. So having done that, you click on create user. Then this is going to be saved. So having created the user, I'll go ahead and update the root value with the, or my bad, with the name of the database user. I think since I already have the password here, let me first copy paste. Since I already have a password, I'm going to first of all paste the password here. Then I'm going to go back to the databases and copy up the user. So whenever you have a user, you must assign the database user to the database. So I'll first of all click on the database user, this, and then I assign it to this DemoDB, then I click on add. So this will always redirect to the interface where we have to manage the user privileges. So first of all, I'm going to copy the username for this DB and have it updated into my configuration file here. So I'll paste it here, and then this is the password. Then this is the database name. Then I'll save the changes. So then I'll go ahead and redirect back to this interface and click on, actually I check all the privileges. So this means that I'm going ahead and assigning all the privileges to this database user. But for cases whereby maybe you do not want this user to do a particular action, then you do not check that out. So for my case, I'll have all that checked and click on make changes so that it goes ahead and saves. Then once that is done, you click on go back. So having created the database and the database user, you move back to your databases and access phpMyAdmin. And at this point of time, you'll see that the database that we created is already here. It does exist. And at this point of time, we do not have any tables within the database. So the fact that I already have my local database, all I'm going to do is exporting this database. So I'll click on export. Then it will go ahead and download the hosting demo database. Then I'll navigate back to the cPanel and ensure that I have the API demo DB accessed. Then I'll click on import. So you ensure that you access the database that you want to work with first. Then you click on import. Then you go ahead and click on choose file. And then you select the downloads, that is if it was saved in the downloads. So I'm going to go ahead and select the file that was downloaded. Then I click on open. Then later on, I click on import. So regarding the import, most of the times if your tables are not that many, the importation will be really fast. So for my case, it was really fast because I actually have two tables. And the main table is the table for the products. And I do have all this added here. So once the tables for the database have been set up, I'm going to go back and re-access my domain for the back end here and try to refresh it. So for this case, I think I first of all have to restart the web app. Then having refreshed it, I'll click on refresh. So you see that at this point of time, having refreshed, you see that the endpoint for API/products returns all the products that are within the database. And at this point of time, I only have a few of the attributes like the ID, the image, the name, and the price. And this is okay for purposes of learning. And this therefore means that the deployment has been successful. So I think one thing I can also add on to this is that most of the times whenever you're working with a subdomain, and most of the times if you're going to work with the API, of course it's not recommended that you just go ahead and have this returned in this format. It is recommended that you always go ahead and document your endpoints, and that calls for usage of, maybe for example, if it is Flask, you can always work with the Flask Swagger documentation for the REST APIs, in that instead of returning responses just like I did have that, you always work with the documentation, in that it goes ahead and always returns something like this, so that it becomes very easy for maybe the front-end developers to follow up your work. So you can always make research on how to work with, for example, documentation in terms of Flask. So since our deployment was successful, I think I can end this here. I hope the session was very insightful. So in summary, we first of all worked with the project preparation, ensuring that we do have the requirements.txt file and also the passenger web server gateway interface file, and also ensuring that the backend API has the cause package. And having done that, we went ahead and zipped our project files, and ensuring that the zipped file does not have the virtual environment local folder. Then we also went ahead and uploaded our project files on the cPanel, and that was within a specific folder. And having done that, we extracted the files within our specific backend folder, and we also ensured that we created the web application. Then having created the web application, I ensured that I activated the virtual environment, and when the virtual environment was active, I went ahead and installed the dependencies for this API. Then having done that, I created a database and then assigned a database user with all privileges for the database. Then I went ahead and also imported the database tables, and I also ensured that I updated my configuration file according to the project structure of my web app. And later on we tested, and also at some point I had to refresh the web application to ensure that it was updating my recent changes. So that is pretty much it for this project. And maybe one last one is that when you access the API folder, the API demo backend folder, actually it is the API demo dot this domain. You see that there is a .htaccess, and this htaccess is always created automatically when we are creating the web application. So it automatically updates everything for us, in that the root application variables, the root application path is always created, in that it points to our root folder for the back end, and also the path for the virtual environment. So all these are always created here automatically for you. So that's all I had for this video. I hope it was very insightful. Thanks for watching, and see you again in the next session, where I'm going to go ahead and deploy the front-end project, in that the front-end project goes ahead and consumes this API so that I have the ability of rendering the products within a web page.